Hello. Welcome to today's discussion of cell types, and in particular, I just want to talk about a basic overview of the characteristics of these larger groups, subgroupings of cells. First of all, we're going to talk about prokaryotic cells, and the name itself is saying that we're dealing with cells that are different or distinct from those that are called eukaryotic cells. So notice we're talking about two broad categories of cell types, the prokaryotic, eukaryotic cell group. Now, the prokaryotic ones are much smaller than eukaryotic cells typically. There is some overlap. Some of the very largest prokaryotic cells are similar in size to some of the very smallest eukaryotic cells. But in general, we'd say that prokaryotic cells are much smaller than eukaryotic cells. And the key feature, the essence of their name, is that they are cells that do not have the structure we call a nucleus. And we'll talk more about the nucleus in future lectures, but the name prokaryote actually means before the nucleus or without a nucleus. Now, prokaryotic cells do have a plasma membrane. They are a cell, and you can see also that the cell might have surrounding its membrane a cell wall structure. Also, you can see from this illustration there might be appendages that extend out from the cell. In this illustration, you can see structures called pili. They're used to help the bacterial cells attach to surfaces. And structures called flagella, used for moving the cell around. Yes, some bacterial cells are quite motile, able to move. Now, their cell wall might have additional material outside of it. A number of different kinds of bacteria have a capsule surrounding them. As a matter of fact, the bacterium that causes tooth decay, it's called Streptococcus mutans, has a thick, sticky capsule that it uses to stick itself to your teeth, and through its biological activity and waste release causes the irritation we call cavities. Now, also, we're going to find that there's going to be components or features of the cell that are located inside of the cell membrane, in the region called the cytoplasm of the cell. You can see illustrated the nucleoid region of the prokaryotic cell. Notice I didn't say nucleus, but nucleoid, and this is where the DNA of the prokaryotic cell is localized. Also, you can see that there are some organelles inside of the prokaryotic cell, the ribosome. One thing we're going to see in our discussion later is that that's really one of the few organelles present in the cytoplasm of the prokaryotic cell. Well, let's consider eukaryotic cells. One of the key features of eukaryotic cells is that we're going to find that their internal structure, their cytoplasmic region, is compartmentalized. It's divided up into packages, containers, bags. All of these are produced by membranes, and we're going to talk about a number of these different kinds of structures, but that's one of the key features we see in eukaryotic cells. So all other living things that aren't prokaryotic are classified as eukaryotic. Either they're single-celled or they might be multi-celled like ourselves, and we expect that in general these cells are going to be larger and typically more complex than the prokaryotic cells we're going to discuss. The key feature, as the name implies, eukaryote, means true nucleus. So these are cells that do have a nucleus, a membrane container for their DNA. So animal cells, notice a lot more material is being represented inside of the plasma membrane, in that cytoplasmic region. So you can see that we're going to have a number of different compartments. Some of them are being labeled for us. Endoplasmic reticulum, the nucleus, the Golgi apparatus. All of these are compartments made of membrane. And notice also that the eukaryotic cell has ribosomes similar to the ribosomes that the prokaryotic cell has. Now, one of the things we're going to find is that the different kinds of eukaryotic cells differ in some of their characteristics. So what we tend not to find in plant cells are some of these organelles that we do see in animal cells, like the centriole, the lysosome, and structures called flagella, although there are some plant cells, specialized ones, that produce flagella. Also, we see these structures called peroxisomes, which you could think of as toxic waste breakdown sites. And we'll talk more about these organelles in future lectures. Now, other features that you find inside the cell is you'll find these structural components that give the cell support. They're called the cytoskeleton. You can see three major contributing parts to that cytoskeleton, and we'll discuss those in more detail. You'll want to work with that table that was provided with the outline for this chapter and start to build recognition. Name of an organelle, something about, one sentence at least, about its structure, one sentence about its function. Work on that. Begin today to build that table of organelle, structure, and function. Now, the plasma membrane is going to be a key component of the cell that we're going to talk about quite a bit because it forms a barrier. It's the boundary where the cytoplasm of the cell stops. All those organelles we were just mentioning, all those structures, were inside the plasma membrane. And it's going to separate that region from the outside environment. Organelles, remember, I said that most of them have a membrane. They're a compartment. So once again, notice here we have a membrane that forms a boundary. You could think of these as being compartments of the interior of the cell. Compartments of what? Well, the cell is based completely on aqueous solutions. So one way you could think of these compartments is that each one of these membrane sacs or structures is going to have within it a particular kind of aqueous solution, certain solutes, certain pH, all those features. And the fluid on the aqueous solution on the other side of that compartment's membrane is probably going to have different composition. But what does this do for the cell? What does it allow the cell to do? Well, by having all of these aqueous solutions with their own specialized solutes associated with them, compartmentalized, well, I can carry out a lot of different activities as a eukaryotic cell in these different separate locations, in these compartmentalized regions of the cell. So we're going to see that as a key feature of these organelles, their specialized function that each of them carries out. Now, plant cells also have internal structures. They're eukaryotic cells, and they're going to be somewhat different than the animal cell. One of these organelles that is found in the plant cell that we don't see in the animal cell is an organelle called the chloroplast, and we'll talk more about that in future lectures. One other one, we find that in plant cells, excuse me, there's a rigid cell wall surrounding on the outside of the plasma membrane, the cell membrane, and we don't see that in animal cells. Now, plant cells, complex structure, still a lot of internal compartmentalization. You can see that same set of membranous organelles that was found in the illustration of the animal cell, but notice the newcomer here, the chloroplast, and realize that you're going to want to have a general idea about those two cell types. Don't worry about having to draw or label one of these illustrations, but you will want to be able to know what are these general organelles that are found within these cell types. Now, realize we've only talked about animal and plant eukaryotic cells, and you want to consider, well, gee, I wonder what are the features of the fungi and the protista. Remember, those other two kingdoms of eukaryotes. Well, you might expect that they're going to have some similarities and characteristics. Also have a nucleus, also are highly compartmentalized internally. Where do they vary? Oh, in some of their slight structures, and I'll mention them as we go along, but we'll be focusing this semester on animal and plant cells. So you can see that some discussion of the fungi and protista will come up, but it won't be an emphasis of ours. So what were our basic cell types? Eukaryotic and prokaryotic. Key difference, have a nucleus, don't have a nucleus. All right, eukaryotes with, prokaryotes without. We also talked about some of the basic features, the basic organelles found in animal and plant cells, just to set the stage for a more thorough discussion of these individual organelles in future lectures. Okay, I hope this gave you a basic idea for the differences between these cell types. I'm going to emphasize some of these differences in another lecture, and then we're going to look specifically at some of the organelles of the eukaryotic cell in a couple other future lectures. Thanks very much. I look forward to talking to you next time.